In the glittering world of luxury hotels, one man's journey from doorman to mogul seemed like a fairy tale. But when a devastating fire threatened to reduce his life's work to ashes, Walter Thompson faced a choice: rebuild or retreat. His decision would not only shape his destiny, but redefine the very essence of hospitality.
I've been a fixture at the Grandview Hotel for over 4 decades now. The polished marble floors have felt the soles of my shoes for so long, I swear they've molded to my footsteps. My name's Walter, and at 68, I'm the oldest employee here. Some folks might think being a doorman at my age is a step down, but let me tell you, there's a dignity in this job that many don't understand. Every morning, I put on my crisp uniform, adjust my cap, and step into the grand lobby of this Chicago landmark. The Grandview's been standing proud since the Roaring '20s, and I like to think I'm as much a part of its history as the Art Deco chandeliers or the sweeping staircase. I've seen it all from my post by the revolving doors. Celebrities trying to sneak in unnoticed, politicians making backroom deals, young couples starting their honeymoons with stars in their eyes. I greet them all with the same warm smile and a tip of my cap. Welcome to the Grandview, I say. And for a moment, I'm the face of this magnificent establishment. But lately things have been changing. The old manager, Mr. Thompson, retired last month. He was a good man who understood the value of experience. We'd often share a cup of coffee before the morning rush, swapping stories about the hotel's colorful history. Those days are gone now. The new manager, Brian Whitaker, is a different breed altogether. Young, ambitious, with an MBA and a chip on his shoulder the size of Lake Michigan. From the moment he walked in, all spit-shined shoes and a tablet in hand, I knew we were in for a shake-up. I still remember our first interaction. I was helping an elderly couple with their luggage when Brian strode up, his eyes glued to his device. "You there," he said, not even looking at me. "Make sure the Johnson's riding bags get to the presidential suite pronto. They're VIPs. I straightened up, my joints creaking a bit. "Of course, sir. I'm Walter, by the way. I've been—" He cut me off with a wave of his hand. Yeah, just get it done, old-timer. We've got standards to maintain." And just like that, he was gone, leaving me standing there with the taste of those words in my mouth. Old-timer. I've been called worse, but something about the way he said it, like I was a relic that had outlived its usefulness, stung more than I cared to admit. Over the next few weeks, I watched as Brian implemented change after change. Out went the personalized welcome notes for returning guests, replaced by generic email confirmations. The live piano player in the lobby, a Grandview tradition for years, was swapped for piped-in music. Cost-cutting measures, Brian called them. I called it sucking the soul out of the place, but I kept my head down and did my job. I've weathered worse storms in my time, and I wasn't about to let some hotshot with a fancy degree get under my skin. I focused on what I do best, making our guests feel welcome. There was Mrs. Abernathy, a widow who's been coming to the Grandview every spring for the past 30 years. I always make sure there's a bouquet of peonies in her room. They were her late husband's favorite. Or young Tommy, the son of a regular business traveler, who I've watched grow from a toddler to a teenager. I still slip him a piece of his favorite candy when his parents aren't looking. These little touches, these connections, they're what make a hotel more than just a place to sleep. They're what turn it into a home away from home. But try telling that to Brian. One morning I overheard him talking to the front desk staff. "We need to streamline our check-in process," he was saying. "No more chit-chat. Get them their keys and move on to the next guest. Time is money, people." I couldn't help but shake my head. In all my years, I've never known a guest to complain about being treated like a human being instead of a walking credit card. But the real trouble started about a month into Brian's tenure. It was a busy Friday afternoon, the lobby buzzing with arrivals for a big medical conference. I was helping a young doctor with her bags when I heard Brian's voice, sharp and irritated. "Walter! Where's Walter?" I turned, seeing him striding towards me, his face like a thundercloud. "I'm right here, Mr. Whitaker. How can I help you?" He jabbed a finger at me. "The Stevensons have been waiting for their car for 15 minutes. Didn't I tell you to have it ready?" I blinked, confused. "I'm sorry, sir, but I don't recall." "Don't give me excuses," he snapped. "Just get it done. Now." I felt my face grow hot as I noticed people starting to stare. In all my years at the Grandview, I'd never been dressed down like this in public, but I swallowed my pride and nodded. "Right away, sir." As I hurried to the valet stand, I could hear Brian apologizing to the Stevensons. "I'm so sorry for the inconvenience. You know how it is with these older employees. Sometimes things slip their minds." The words hit me like a slap. I wanted to turn around, to defend myself, to point out that he had never given me any instructions about the Stevensons' car, but I didn't. I just kept walking, my back straight and my head high, even as I felt the weight of every eye in the lobby on me. It turned out that there had been a mix-up with the valet team, not me. But Brian never apologized. He just gave me a curt nod when I reported that the situation had been resolved. That night, as I hung up my uniform, I caught a glimpse of myself in the locker room mirror. The face looking back at me was lined with years of experience, eyes that had seen so much of life. For the first time in a long while, I felt every one of my 68 years. But then I straightened my shoulders. I'd faced discrimination before, weathered storms that would have broken a lesser man. This was just another challenge, and I'd meet it head-on. After all, I had a secret that Brian couldn't even begin to imagine. A secret that, if revealed, would turn his world upside down. As I left the hotel that night, I allowed myself a small smile. Brian might think he knew everything about running this hotel, but he had no idea who he was really dealing with. And someday, he'd learn that lesson the hard way. Little did I know, that day would come sooner than I expected, and it would change everything. For me, for Brian, and for the Grandview Hotel. If you're intrigued by my story and want to hear how this all unfolds, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next in this tale of prejudice, perseverance, and a twist that'll leave you speechless. But for now, let me take you back to where it all began, long before I ever set foot in the Grandview. I grew up in the south side of Chicago, in a neighborhood where dreams often got swallowed up by the harsh realities of life. My parents worked multiple jobs just to keep food on the table, but they always stressed the importance of education and hard work. "Knowledge is the one thing they can't take from you," my father used to say. I took those words to heart, studying late into the night by the flickering light of a kerosene lamp when we couldn't afford to keep the electricity on. It wasn't easy, but I managed to earn a scholarship to college, the first in my family to do so. Those college years were eye-opening. I was often the only black face in a sea of white, but I was determined to prove I belonged. I threw myself into my studies, particularly business and hospitality management. Something about the idea of creating spaces where people could feel welcome, regardless of who they were, resonated with me. After graduation, I started at the bottom, working as a bellhop at a small hotel. I learned every aspect of the business, from housekeeping to front desk operations. I was hungry for knowledge, for experience, for any opportunity to prove myself. It was during this time that I met Margaret. She was a guest at the hotel, a young lawyer in town for a conference. We struck up a conversation over the breakfast buffet, and before I knew it, we were spending every free moment together. Margaret was different from anyone I'd ever met. She saw past the color of my skin, past my humble job, and recognized the ambition burning inside me. She encouraged me to dream bigger, to reach higher. With her support, I started taking night classes in business administration. It wasn't easy, working full-time and studying, but Margaret was my rock. She'd quiz me on financial terms while we shared quick dinners, or listen to me practice presentations in the wee hours of the morning. As the years passed, I worked my way up the ladder. Assistant manager, Then manager, always pushing myself to learn more, to be better. Margaret and I got married, bought a small house, started talking about having kids. But life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. Just as my career was taking off, Margaret was diagnosed with cancer. Suddenly, our world revolved around hospital visits and chemotherapy sessions. I wanted to quit my job to take care of her full-time, but Margaret wouldn't hear of it. "Your work is part of who you are," she told me. "Don't give up on your dreams. Promise me you'll keep going, no matter what." I promised her, even as my heart was breaking. And true to her incredible spirit, Margaret fought hard. For 3 years, she battled the disease with a grace and strength that left me in awe. But in the end, cancer proved too formidable an opponent. I lost Margaret on a quiet Tuesday morning in spring. The world seemed to lose its color that day. For a while I was lost, drowning in grief and memories. But slowly, painfully, I remembered my promise to her, to keep going, to keep reaching for my dreams. And so, with her memory as my guiding light, I threw myself back into my work with renewed vigor. I climbed higher in the hospitality world, earning a reputation as a fair and innovative manager. I took risks, invested wisely, and before I knew it, I was in a position to buy my first hotel. It was a small, struggling property on the outskirts of Chicago, but I saw its potential. With hard work and dedication, I turned it around, transforming it into a profitable and well-respected establishment. That first success led to others. I expanded, buying more properties, always with an eye for potential where others saw only problems. I never forgot my roots, though. I made it a point to hire diverse staff, to give opportunities to those who might otherwise be overlooked. And then, about 5 years ago, the opportunity of a lifetime presented itself. The Grandview Hotel, a Chicago institution, was up for sale. It was a massive undertaking, far bigger than anything I'd done before. But I knew, deep in my bones, that this was what I'd been working towards all my life. I poured everything I had into acquiring the Grandview. It stretched me to my financial limits, but finally, after months of negotiations, it was mine. The boy from the South Side now owned one of the most prestigious hotels in Chicago, but I knew that with great power came great responsibility. I wanted to understand every aspect of the Grandview's operations, to know its strengths and weaknesses intimately. And so, I made a decision that would change everything. I decided to work incognito as a doorman, the very position I'd started in all those years ago. I would observe, learn, and plan how to make the Grandview even better. Only a select few knew my true identity. The rest of the staff, including the management I'd hired, believed I was simply Walter, the elderly doorman. It was a risk, but I believed it was necessary. And for a while, it worked beautifully. I gained insights I never would have had from an office. I saw firsthand the dedication of the staff, the small kindnesses that made the Grandview special. But then Brian arrived, bringing with him a wave of change that threatened to wash away everything that made the Grandview unique. And suddenly, my undercover mission took on a new urgency. As I stood there in the lobby, smarting from Brian's public rebuke, I knew that the time for watching and waiting was coming to an end. Soon, very soon, I would need to reveal my true identity and fight for the soul of the hotel I'd worked so hard to acquire. Little did I know, the confrontation would come sooner and more dramatically than I ever could have imagined. The next few weeks at the Grandview were tense, to say the least. Brian's management style was like a wrecking ball, demolishing years of tradition and customer service excellence. I watched helplessly as longtime employees were let go, replaced by fresh-faced college grads who knew more about social media algorithms than they did about making guests feel at home. One particularly painful day, I arrived at work to find Maria, our head housekeeper of 25 years, clearing out her locker. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her hands shaking as she packed away photos of her family that had decorated her small space. "What happened, Maria?" I asked, though I had a sinking feeling I already knew the answer. She looked up at me, her face a mask of hurt and confusion. "Mr. Whitaker, he says I'm not efficient enough, that I'm too slow. Can you believe it, Walter? After all these years?" I felt a surge of anger rising in my chest. Maria was the heart and soul of our housekeeping team. She knew every guest's preferences, every quirk of the old building. Her attention to detail was unmatched. But in Brian's world of metrics and bottom lines, her experience meant nothing. I helped Maria carry her things to her car, promising to check in on her. As I watched her drive away, I couldn't help but feel like a piece of the Grandview's soul had left with her. Returning to the lobby, I overheard Brian talking to the new front desk manager, a young woman fresh out of hospitality school. "Remember, Sarah, it's all about turnover," he was saying. "The faster we get them in and out, the more rooms we can book. Efficiency is key." I shook my head, biting my tongue to keep from speaking out. In all my years in this business, I'd never heard of treating guests like items on an assembly line. The Grandview had always prided itself on making people feel at home, on creating an experience that would bring them back year after year. But Brian seemed determined to turn it into just another faceless chain hotel. As the days wore on, I noticed a change in our regular guests. The warmth and familiarity that had once characterized their visits was replaced by a cool efficiency. No one lingered in the lobby anymore, chatting with staff or fellow travelers. The place had the sterile feel of an airport terminal, all business and no heart. I tried to maintain my usual level of service, greeting guests by name, remembering their preferences, offering a kind word or a helping hand. But increasingly, I felt like a relic from another time, out of step with Brian's vision of modern hospitality. One afternoon, as I was helping an elderly couple with their bags, I overheard a conversation that made my blood run cold. "Did you hear?" One of the bellhops was whispering to another. "Mr. Whitaker's planning to outsource the doorman position. Says it'll save on benefits and pension costs." I nearly dropped the suitcase I was carrying. Outsource? After all these years of loyal service? I knew Brian saw me as outdated, but I never imagined he'd go this far. That night, as I hung up my uniform, I caught sight of myself in the mirror again. The face looking back at me was tired, lined with worry. For the first time since I'd started this undercover venture, I questioned whether I had the strength to see it through. But then I remembered Margaret, her unwavering belief in me, her insistence that I never give up on my dreams. And I knew I couldn't back down now. Too much was at stake, not just for me, but for every employee who'd poured their heart into making the Grandview special. The next morning, I arrived at work early, determined to confront Brian about the outsourcing rumor. But as I approached his office, I heard raised voices. Peering through the gap in the door, I saw Brian in a heated discussion with Mr. Jameson, one of our most loyal and influential guests. Mr. Jameson, a distinguished businessman in his 60s, was red-faced with anger. "I've been coming to the Grandview for over 30 years, he was saying, his voice tight with emotion. "And I've never been treated so poorly. Your staff is cold, impersonal. And where's Maria? She's the only one who knows how to properly press my suits." Brian was doing his best to placate Mr. Jameson, but I could see the panic in his eyes. Mr. Jameson wasn't just any guest. His company booked hundreds of room nights a year for their executives and clients. "I'm sorry you're unhappy, Mr. Jameson," Brian was saying. "I assure you, all the changes we've made are to improve efficiency and modernize our services." Mr. Jameson's face grew even redder. "Efficiency? I don't come to the Grandview for efficiency. I come here because it feels like home. Or at least it used to." With that, he stormed out of the office, nearly running into me in the process. I steadied him gently. "Mr. Jameson," I said softly, "is everything all right?" He looked at me, his anger softening slightly. "Walter," he sighed, "at least you're still here, but I'm afraid this will be my last stay at the Grandview. It's not the same place anymore." As he walked away, I felt a mix of sadness and determination wash over me. This was the last straw. I couldn't stand by and watch as everything I'd worked for, everything the Grandview stood for, was dismantled by Brian's misguided policies. I straightened my uniform and walked into Brian's office without knocking. He looked up, surprise and annoyance flashing across his face. "Walter, what are you doing here? I'm in the middle of something." I closed the door behind me and stood tall, channeling all the authority I'd earned over my years in the hospitality industry. "Mr. Whitaker," I said, my voice steady. "We need to talk." Brian's eyebrows shot up. "Excuse me? I don't have time for—" I cut him off, something I'd never done before. "You'll make time, because what I have to say might just save this hotel." For a moment, Brian looked like he might call security, but something in my tone must have gotten through to him. He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "Fine, you have 5 minutes." I took a deep breath. This was it. The moment I'd reveal my true identity, the moment I'd fight for the soul of the Grandview. But as I opened my mouth to speak, a commotion from the lobby interrupted us. We both rushed out to find chaos unfolding. A pipe had burst in one of the upper floors, sending water cascading down the grand staircase. Guests were shouting, staff running around in panic, and in the middle of it all stood Sarah, the new front desk manager, looking completely overwhelmed. Brian immediately started barking orders, but it was clear he was out of his depth. This was the kind of crisis that required experience, not MBA theories. Without thinking, I stepped forward, my voice cutting through the noise. "Everyone, please remain calm. Sarah, call maintenance immediately. Brian, we need to start moving guests from the affected floors. I'll coordinate with housekeeping to get extra towels and start the cleanup." To my surprise, people started listening. Years of handling crises kicked in, and I found myself directing staff, reassuring guests, and somehow bringing order to the chaos. As the situation slowly came under control, I became aware of Brian staring at me, his mouth slightly open. The look of shock on his face might have been comical if the situation weren't so serious. Once the immediate crisis was handled, Brian pulled me aside. His face was a mix of confusion and grudging respect. Where did you learn to handle a situation like that?" I looked him straight in the eye. "Mr. Whitaker, there's a lot about me you don't know, and I think it's time we had that talk." He nodded slowly, the events of the day clearly having shaken his confidence. "My office, now." As we walked back to his office, I could feel the weight of the moment. Everything was about to change. The secret I'd been keeping, the identity I'd been hiding, it was all about to come out. I closed the door behind us, took a deep breath, and began to speak. "Brian, what I'm about to tell you might be hard to believe, but I need you to listen carefully." He sat down heavily in his chair, looking suddenly tired. "After what I just saw out there, Walter, I'm ready to believe almost anything." I smiled slightly. "Good, because the truth is, I'm not just a doorman. My name is Walter Thompson, and I'm the owner of the Grandview Hotel." The look on Brian's face was priceless. His jaw dropped, his eyes widened, and for a moment, he seemed incapable of speech. When he finally found his voice, it came out as a strangled whisper. "What?" I began to explain, telling him about my journey from a poor kid in the South Side to a successful hotel owner, about my decision to work undercover to truly understand the Grandview's operations. As I spoke, I could see the realization dawning on him, along with a growing horror at how he'd treated me, treated the owner of the company, over the past weeks. "But why?" he finally managed to ask. "Why go through all this?" I leaned forward, my voice earnest. "Because the Grandview isn't just a business to me, Brian. It's a legacy. It's about creating a place where people feel valued, where memories are made. And I'm afraid that in your rush to modernize and cut costs, you've lost sight of what truly makes a great hotel." Brian slumped in his chair, the fight gone out of him. I don't know what to say. I've made a terrible mistake, haven't I? I nodded slowly. Yes, you have. But it's not too late to fix it. The question is, are you willing to learn? To see the value in experience, in personal touch, in treating both guests and staff like family. He looked up at me, and for the first time since he'd started at the Grandview, I saw humility in his eyes. I am. That is, if you're willing to give me another chance. I smiled, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. I am. But things are going to change around here, starting now. As we began to discuss how to undo the damage and rebuild the Grandview's reputation, I felt a surge of hope. It wasn't going to be easy, but with Brian's modern knowledge and my experience, we had a chance to make the Grandview better than ever. And as for me, well, I had a feeling my days as an undercover boss were coming to an end. It was time to step into the light and lead the Grandview into a new era, one that honored its past while embracing the future. Little did I know, the challenges we'd face in the coming weeks would test us all in ways we never expected. But that, my friends, is a story for another day. The days following my revelation to Brian were a whirlwind of activity. We had a hotel to save, a reputation to rebuild, and a staff to reunite. It wasn't going to be easy, but I was ready for the challenge. After all, I'd built this place from the ground up once before. I could do it again. Our first order of business was to address the staff. I'll never forget the looks on their faces when I walked into the employee lounge, not in my doorman's uniform, but in a tailored suit. The room fell silent, confusion etched on every face. I cleared my throat and began to speak, explaining who I really was and why I'd chosen to work undercover. I told them about my journey, my vision for the Grandview, and how each of them played a crucial role in making that vision a reality. As I spoke, I could see the emotions play across their faces: shock, disbelief, and then, gradually, understanding and even a glimmer of hope. When I finished, there was a moment of silence before Maria, who I'd immediately rehired, stood up with tears in her eyes. "Mr. Thompson," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "I always knew there was something special about you. Thank you for showing us that good people can still succeed in this world." Her words hit me hard, reminding me of the responsibility I carried. These people had put their trust in me, and I was determined not to let them down. Over the next few weeks, Brian and I worked tirelessly to undo the damage his policies had caused. We rehired many of the staff members who'd been let go, emphasizing the value of their experience and dedication. We revived old traditions that had made the Grandview special, like the live piano in the lobby and the personalized welcome notes for guests. But we didn't just turn back the clock. Brian, to his credit, had some good ideas about modernizing our operations. We implemented a new, more efficient booking system and upgraded our Wi-Fi throughout the hotel. The trick was finding the balance between efficiency and the personal touch that had always been the Grandview's hallmark. It wasn't all smooth sailing, though. Some of the younger staff members Brian had hired were resistant to the changes, used to the impersonal corporate style he'd initially implemented. I remember one particularly tense meeting with Sarah, the front desk manager. "With all due respect, Mr. Thompson," she said, her voice tight with frustration, "these old-fashioned methods are inefficient. We're wasting time chatting with guests when we could be processing check-ins faster." I leaned back in my chair, studying her for a moment. "Sarah," I said gently, "let me ask you something. Why did you get into the hospitality industry?" She blinked, caught off guard by the question. "Well, I guess I've always liked helping people." I nodded. "Exactly. And that's what we're doing here. We're not just processing check-ins. We're creating experiences, making memories. That extra minute you spend chatting with a guest might be what turns their stay from good to unforgettable." I could see the wheels turning in her head as she considered my words. It was a start, but I knew it would take time for some of the staff to fully embrace our new, or rather old, way of doing things. As we worked to get our house in order, word began to spread about the changes at the Grandview. Mr. Jameson, who had been on the verge of taking his business elsewhere, returned for a stay. I made sure to greet him personally in the lobby. His eyes widened in recognition. Walter, or should I say Mr. Thompson? I heard the rumors, but I hardly believed them. I smiled, extending my hand. It's still Walter to you, Mr. Jameson. I hope you'll find that some things at the Grandview never change, like our commitment to making you feel at home. He grasped my hand warmly. Well, I'll be. You've certainly piqued my curiosity. I look forward to seeing these changes for myself. By the end of his stay, Mr. Jameson was beaming. He pulled me aside as he was checking out, telling me it was the best experience he'd had at the Grandview in years. You've managed to keep the soul of this place intact, while still moving forward, he said. It's not an easy balance to strike. His words were a much-needed boost. We were on the right track, but we still had a long way to go. One of our biggest challenges was rebuilding relationships with our long-term employees. Many felt betrayed, not just by Brian's actions, but by my deception as well. I knew it would take more than words to regain their trust. I started by working alongside them, just as I had when I was undercover. I helped the bellhops with luggage, assisted the housekeeping staff, and even pulled a few shifts at the front desk. It was exhausting, but it sent a clear message. I wasn't above any job in this hotel. Slowly but surely, I saw the staff start to come around. The tension in the air began to dissipate, replaced by a cautious optimism. I overheard snippets of conversation in the break room, staff members excitedly discussing the positive feedback from guests, the return of regular customers who had stayed away during Brian's tenure. But just as things were looking up, we hit a major snag. A prominent travel blogger had stayed at the Grandview during the height of Brian's cost-cutting measures. Her scathing review, titled "The Fall of a Chicago Icon," had just gone viral. The blogger, a young woman named Alexis Chen, had a massive following in the travel community. Her words painted a damning picture of the Grandview: cold staff, corner-cutting on amenities, a general feeling of neglect permeating every aspect of her stay. As I read the review, my heart sank. This was exactly the kind of publicity we didn't need as we were trying to turn things around. I could already imagine the cancellations rolling in, the potential guests choosing other hotels based on this one influential voice. I called an emergency meeting with Brian and our newly formed management team. The mood in the room was grim as I laid out the situation. This review could undo all the progress we've made, Brian said, running a hand through his hair. We need to go into damage control mode, maybe offer some steep discounts, run a promotional campaign. I shook my head. No, that's not the Grandview way. We don't need gimmicks. We need to show people the truth. An idea was forming in my mind. Crazy, perhaps, but just crazy enough that it might work. We're going to invite Alexis Chen back to the Grandview, I announced. All expenses paid. The room erupted in protests. Are you crazy? She'll just trash us again. We can't risk it. I held up a hand for silence. Listen to me. We know we've changed. We know we're better than what she experienced. This is our chance to prove it, not just to her, but to everyone who reads her blog. It was a risky move, no doubt about it. But as I looked around the room at the faces of my team, I saw determination replacing fear. They believed in what we were doing, and they were ready to show it to the world. I drafted the invitation myself, being completely transparent about who I was and what had happened at the Grandview. I acknowledged the validity of her previous experience and expressed our sincere desire to show her how we'd changed. To our surprise, Alexis accepted. In her response, she admitted she was intrigued by our unusual approach. She agreed to come for a 3-day stay and write an honest follow-up review. The days leading up to her arrival were a flurry of activity. Not because we were doing anything special for her, we didn't believe in putting on a show, but because everyone was determined to be at their best. I made sure to be in the lobby when Alexis arrived. As she walked through the doors, I saw her eyes widen as she recognized me from my photo. I stepped forward, extending my hand. "Ms. Chen, welcome back to the Grandview. I'm Walter Thompson." She shook my hand, her gaze appraising. "Mr. Thompson, I have to admit, this is not what I expected." I smiled. "Well, Ms. Chen, I hope the Grandview will continue to surprise you, in the best way possible, throughout your stay." As I personally escorted her to her room, I could see her taking everything in. The warm greetings from the staff, the subtle improvements we'd made to the decor, the general atmosphere of the place. She was silent, but I could almost see the wheels turning in her head. "Enjoy your stay, Ms. Chen," I said as I left her at her door. "And please, don't hesitate to let us know if there's anything you need, anything at all." As I walked away, I felt a mix of anxiety and hope. We'd done all we could to show Alexis, and by extension, the world, what the Grandview truly stood for. Now all we could do was wait and see how she would respond. Little did I know, Alexis Chen's second review would be just the beginning of a series of events that would test the Grandview, and me, in ways I never could have imagined. But that, my friends, is a story that deserves its own telling. The days following Alexis Chen's departure were filled with a nervous energy that permeated every corner of the Grandview. We'd done our best to showcase the hotel's renewed spirit, but the power of her words could make or break us. As we waited for her review to drop, I found myself reflecting on how far we'd come and how much further we still had to go. It was a Tuesday morning when Brian burst into my office, his face flushed with excitement. "Walter, it's up. Alexis's review is live." My heart raced as I pulled up the article on my computer. The title alone made me catch my breath. "The Phoenix Rises, the Grandview Hotel's Remarkable Comeback." As I read through Alexis's words, I felt a wave of emotion wash over me. She detailed her initial skepticism, her surprise at the changes she encountered, and her growing appreciation for the unique blend of traditional hospitality and modern efficiency we'd cultivated. "In an age where corporate uniformity often overshadows individual character," she wrote, "the Grandview stands as a testament to the power of personal touch. From the moment I stepped through the doors, I was enveloped in an atmosphere of warmth and genuine care that I'd thought lost to the annals of hospitality history." She went on to praise specific staff members by name, noting their attentiveness and the obvious pride they took in their work. She even mentioned her interactions with me, describing our conversations and how they had given her a new perspective on the importance of leadership in shaping a hotel's culture. The review concluded with a powerful statement. "The Grandview Hotel isn't just a place to stay. It's a masterclass in how to honor tradition while embracing progress. It's a reminder that in the world of hospitality, the human element will always be the most crucial factor. I came as a skeptic, but I leave as a devoted fan. The Grandview hasn't just reclaimed its former glory, it's surpassed it." The impact of Alexis's review was immediate and overwhelming. Our phones started ringing off the hook with reservation requests. Our social media accounts were flooded with positive comments and shares. Even other travel bloggers and journalists were reaching out, eager to experience the Grandview's renaissance for themselves. In the midst of this whirlwind of positive attention, I made sure to gather the entire staff for a meeting. As I stood before them, I could see the pride shining in their eyes. "And this success," I told them, my voice thick with emotion, "belongs to each and every one of you. Your dedication, your passion, your unwavering commitment to making every guest feel special. That's what makes the Grandview truly grand. Thank you for believing in this vision, for working tirelessly to make it a reality." The room erupted in applause, and I saw tears in more than a few eyes. We'd been through so much together, and now we were reaping the rewards of our hard work. But as the saying goes, success often brings its own set of challenges. As our bookings soared, we found ourselves struggling to maintain the level of personalized service that had become our hallmark. The staff was working longer hours, and I could see the strain beginning to show. It was Brian who came to me with a solution. "Walter," he said, "I think it's time we consider expanding. Not just hiring more staff, but maybe even opening another location." I'll admit, the idea gave me pause. The Grandview had always been singular, unique. The thought of trying to replicate its magic elsewhere seemed daunting, if not impossible. But as I mulled it over, I realized that this could be an opportunity to spread our philosophy of hospitality even further. We could create jobs, revitalize another historic property, and touch even more lives with our approach to service. After much discussion and careful planning, we decided to take the plunge. We found a beautiful old hotel in Boston that had fallen on hard times. It had good bones, as they say, and I could see the potential hidden beneath years of neglect. The process of renovating and staffing the new hotel was exhausting, but exhilarating. We brought over some of our most experienced staff from Chicago to train the new team, ensuring that the Grandview's spirit would be infused into every aspect of the new location. As the opening day for the Boston Grandview approached, I found myself spending more and more time there, overseeing the final preparations. It was during one of these visits that I received a call that would shake me to my core. It was Maria, her voice trembling with panic. "Mr. Thompson, you need to come back to Chicago right away. There's been a fire at the Grandview." I felt as if the ground had dropped out from under me. The Grandview, my life's work, the place that held so many memories, it was in danger. I caught the next flight back to Chicago, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. When I arrived, the sight that greeted me was heartbreaking. The fire had been contained to one wing of the hotel, but the damage was extensive. Smoke stains marred the once pristine facade, and the acrid smell of burnt wood hung heavy in the air. As I stood there, taking in the devastation, I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Brian, his face grim but determined. "It's bad, Walter," he said, "but we'll rebuild. We've overcome worse." His words stirred something in me. Yes, this was a setback, a painful one, but it was also an opportunity to show the world once again what the Grandview was made of. I called an emergency meeting with all available staff. As they gathered in the undamaged lobby, I could see the fear and uncertainty in their eyes. Some had tears streaming down their faces, mourning for the place that had been like a second home to them. Taking a deep breath, I addressed the group. "I know this looks bad," I began, my voice steady despite the turmoil I felt inside. "But let me tell you something. The Grandview isn't just these walls or these rooms. The Grandview is us. It's the spirit we bring to our work every day. It's the way we make our guests feel. And that, my friends, is something no fire can ever destroy." I saw heads nodding, backs straightening as my words sank in. "We're going to rebuild," I continued, "and we're going to make the Grandview better than ever. But more importantly, we're going to show the world what real hospitality looks like, starting right now." I laid out my plan. We would reach out to all the guests who had reservations, explaining the situation and offering to rebook them at our Boston location with complimentary upgrades. For those who couldn't make the trip to Boston, we would work with other high-end hotels in Chicago to ensure they were taken care of. But the real work, I explained, would happen right here. "We're going to document every step of the rebuilding process," I said. "We'll share it on social media, invite our loyal guests to be part of the journey. And when we reopen, it'll be the biggest celebration Chicago has ever seen." The energy in the room had shifted. Where there had been despair, I now saw determination. Where there had been fear, I saw hope. We were down, but we were far from out. The next few months were a blur of activity. True to my word, we shared every step of the rebuilding process with our followers. We posted videos of the cleanup efforts, held live Q&A sessions about our plans for the renovated wing, even invited some of our most loyal guests to sign one of the new support beams before it was installed. The response was overwhelming. Messages of support poured in from around the world. Former guests shared their favorite Grandview memories and their excitement for the reopening. Other hotels in the area, rather than trying to capitalize on our misfortune, reached out to offer help and resources. Through it all, I made sure to be a constant presence, both for our staff and for the public. I worked alongside the construction crews, helped with the redesign plans, and made sure every decision we made stayed true to the Grandview's spirit. Finally, after months of hard work, the day of our grand reopening arrived. As I stood at the entrance, preparing to cut the ribbon, I was struck by the size of the crowd that had gathered. There were faces I recognized, longtime guests, local business owners, even Alexis Chen, who had flown in specially for the event. As the ribbon fell away and the doors opened, I felt a sense of déjà vu. It was like that first day all over again, when I had purchased the Grandview and seen its potential. But this time, I wasn't alone. I had a team, no, a family, beside me, ready to write the next chapter in the Grandview's story. The renovated wing was a perfect blend of classic elegance and modern luxury. We'd taken the opportunity to upgrade our facilities while still maintaining the timeless charm that had always been the Grandview's hallmark. The response from our first guests was overwhelmingly positive. In the weeks that followed, we saw our booking rates soar even higher than before the fire. The publicity surrounding our reopening, combined with the goodwill we'd built during the renovation process, had elevated the Grandview's profile to new heights. But more importantly, I saw a change in our staff. They moved with a new confidence, a deeper sense of pride in their work. They had been tested by fire, literally, and had come out stronger. They weren't just employees anymore. They were the guardians of the Grandview's legacy. As for me, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me to this point. From a poor kid in the South Side to the owner of not one, but two thriving luxury hotels. From an undercover boss to a public figure, leading my team through triumph and disaster. I thought about Margaret, wishing she could have seen all of this. But in a way, I felt her presence in every corner of the Grandview. Her spirit of perseverance, her belief in the power of hard work and kindness. These were the foundations upon which we had rebuilt our hotel and our reputation. Standing in the lobby, watching guests check in, staff members going about their duties with smiles on their faces, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. The Grandview had given me so much more than success or wealth. It had given me a purpose, a family, a home. And as I straightened my tie and prepared to greet the next guest, I knew that this was far from the end of our story. It was just the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with endless possibilities and the promise of more lives touched, more memories made, more moments of true hospitality shared. The Grandview stood tall once again, a beacon of warmth and welcome in the heart of Chicago. And I, Walter Thompson, once an undercover boss, now stood proudly at its helm, ready to lead it into a future as grand as its name. As the Grandview settled into its new rhythm, I found myself facing an unexpected challenge. The hotel's resurgence had caught the attention of a major international hotel chain, Lux Global Hotels. Their CEO, a sharp-suited businessman named Victor Hawthorne, requested a meeting with me. I'll admit, I was intrigued. The Grandview's success story had become something of a legend in the hospitality industry, and I was curious to hear what Lux Global had to say. So, on a crisp autumn morning, I welcomed Victor into my office. His proposition was both flattering and unsettling. Lux Global wanted to buy the Grandview and make it the flagship property of their new boutique luxury line. The offer was staggering, more money than I'd ever dreamed of seeing in my lifetime. Victor painted a seductive picture of expansion, of taking the Grandview brand global. "Imagine," he said, his eyes gleaming with ambition, "a Grandview in Paris, in Tokyo, in Dubai. Your vision, your philosophy of hospitality, spreading across the world." I'd be lying if I said I wasn't tempted. The idea of seeing the Grandview name in lights in the world's greatest cities was alluring. And the money? Well, it would set up my family for generations to come. But as I listened to Victor's pitch, a knot formed in my stomach. Something about it felt wrong. The Grandview wasn't just a brand to be bought and sold. It was a living, breathing entity, shaped by the people who worked here and the guests who'd made it their home away from home. I told Victor I'd think about it, but in my heart, I already knew my answer. Still, I decided to take some time to reflect on the decision. That evening, after everyone had gone home, I walked through the quiet halls of the Grandview. Every corner held a memory. There was the spot where Mr. Jameson had proposed to his wife on their 50th anniversary. The suite where a young author had written the final chapters of her best-selling novel. The conference room where a small tech startup had sealed the deal that would make them a household name. These weren't just rooms and spaces. They were the backdrop to countless human stories, moments of joy, sorrow, triumph, and connection. Could all of this really be replicated in Paris or Tokyo? Would a Grandview in Dubai still have the same soul? As I pondered these questions, I found myself in front of a portrait of Margaret. Her smile, captured in oil and canvas, seemed to hold all the warmth and spirit of the Grandview itself. I remembered her words from so long ago. "Don't give up on your dreams. Promise me you'll keep going, no matter what." In that moment, I knew what I had to do. The next morning I called Victor and politely declined his offer. He was surprised, to say the least, and tried to sweeten the deal. But my mind was made up. The Grandview wasn't for sale, at any price. Word of Lux Global's offer and my refusal quickly spread through the hotel grapevine. I decided to address it head-on in our next all-staff meeting. As I stood before my team, I could see the mix of curiosity and concern on their faces. I explained the situation honestly, laying out the offer and my reasons for turning it down. The Grandview isn't just a hotel, I told them. It's not just a brand or a business. It's a family. It's our home, and you don't sell your home to the highest bidder. The room erupted in applause. I saw tears in Maria's eyes, and Brian was grinning from ear to ear. In that moment, I knew I'd made the right choice. The Grandview's value couldn't be measured in dollars and cents. Its true worth was in the people who brought it to life every day. But our challenges were far from over. The publicity surrounding Lux Global's offer had put us in the spotlight once again. While many praised our decision to remain independent, others saw it as a missed opportunity. Competitors started to circle, sensing a chance to poach our staff or lure away our loyal guests. We needed to prove once again that the Grandview was more than just another luxury hotel. It was time to double down on what made us unique. I gathered our management team for a brainstorming session. We spent hours discussing ways to enhance the Grandview experience, to make it even more personal and memorable. It was Sarah, our once skeptical front desk manager, who came up with the idea that would define our next chapter. "What if," she suggested, her eyes bright with excitement, "we created personalized experiences for each guest? Not just the usual concierge services, but truly unique adventures tailored to their interests." The idea took root and blossomed. We launched what we called the Grandview Grand Experience-In program. Upon booking, guests would be invited to share their passions and interests. Our staff would then work tirelessly to create one-of-a-kind experiences for them during their stay. For the history buff, we arranged private tours of Chicago's hidden architectural gems. For the foodie, we set up cooking classes with renowned local chefs. For the music lover, we secured backstage passes to shows at legendary venues like the Chicago Theater. The program was a massive undertaking, requiring intense coordination and creativity from our entire team. But the results were nothing short of magical. Guests weren't just staying at the Grandview anymore, they were living out their dreams. Word spread quickly. Social media was flooded with posts from delighted guests sharing their Grandview grand experiences. Travel magazines clamored to feature us, and even a few celebrities started to make the Grandview their go-to Chicago destination. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. The personalized nature of the program meant that sometimes, despite our best efforts, we fell short of a guest's expectations. I remember one particularly challenging situation with a high-profile guest, a tech billionaire known for his exacting standards. He had requested an experience that would push the boundaries of innovation. Our team had pulled out all the stops, arranging a virtual reality tour of Chicago's future skyline and a meeting with cutting-edge AI researchers. But when the guest arrived, he was unimpressed, claiming it wasn't revolutionary enough. I decided to handle this personally. I invited the guest to my office, where we had a long conversation about innovation, risk-taking, and the nature of true luxury. I shared stories of my own journey, of the risks I'd taken with the Grandview, of our constant striving to redefine hospitality. By the end of our talk, the guest's perspective had shifted. He realized that true innovation wasn't about flashy technology or grand gestures, but about human connection and continuous improvement. He ended up extending his stay and became one of our most vocal supporters. This experience taught us a valuable lesson. The Grandview Grand Experience wasn't just about creating perfect moments. It was about fostering genuine connections and personal growth for our guests and for ourselves. As the program evolved, so did our staff. I watched with pride as they grew more confident, more creative, more invested in each guest's journey. The lines between departments blurred as everyone collaborated to make each experience special. The Grandview wasn't just a workplace anymore. It was a canvas for creativity and compassion. Our success didn't go unnoticed in the wider community. Other businesses in Chicago started reaching out, wanting to partner with us on experiences. Local artists, musicians, chefs, and entrepreneurs became part of our extended Grandview family. We were no longer just a hotel. We were becoming a cultural hub, a catalyst for showcasing the best of Chicago. But with all this success, I never forgot the lessons of the past. I made sure to stay connected to every level of our operations. At least once a week, I'd don my old doorman's uniform and work a shift at the front entrance. It kept me grounded, reminding me of where we'd come from and what truly mattered. It was during one of these shifts that I had an encounter that brought everything full circle. An elderly couple approached the entrance, the man helping his wife with her walker. As I moved to assist them, the man looked at me with a spark of recognition. "Walter," he said, squinting at my name tag. "Walter Thompson. Is that really you?" It took me a moment, but then it hit me. This was Mr. Davidson, the very first guest I'd welcomed to the Grandview when I bought the place all those years ago. He and his wife had been celebrating their 40th anniversary then. Now, here they were, older, but still very much in love. As I helped them with their luggage, Mr. Davidson regaled me with stories of their many stays at the Grandview over the years. "This place," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "it's been like a second home to us. We've celebrated anniversaries, birthdays, even our grandson's wedding here. And through it all, there's been something special about it. A warmth, a feeling of being truly cared for." His words touched me deeply. This, I realized, was what it was all about. Not the accolades, not the financial success, but these human connections, these lives we'd been privileged to be a part of. That night, as I sat in my office reviewing plans for the Grandview's future, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. The journey hadn't always been easy. There had been setbacks, challenges, moments of doubt. But through it all, we'd stayed true to our vision of what hospitality should be. I thought about the young man I'd been, working multiple jobs to put myself through school. I thought about Margaret, her unwavering belief in me. I thought about all the people who'd been part of the Grandview's story, the staff who'd become family, the guests who'd given us their trust, even Brian, whose missteps had ultimately led to our renewal. The Grandview was more than just a successful business now. It was a testament to the power of perseverance, of staying true to one's values, of treating every person with dignity and respect. It was proof that in a world often driven by bottom lines and impersonal corporations, there was still room for genuine human connection. As I looked out over the twinkling lights of Chicago, I felt a sense of peace. The Grandview's story was far from over. There would be new challenges to face, new heights to reach. But whatever the future held, I knew we would face it together, with the same spirit of warmth and welcome that had brought us this far. From a doorman to an undercover boss to the proud owner of a truly grand hotel, my journey had been an extraordinary one. But the greatest reward wasn't the success or the recognition. It was the knowledge that every day, in our own small way, we were making the world a little bit brighter, a little more welcoming, one guest at a time. And really, isn't that what true hospitality is all about? As the Grandview continued to thrive, I found myself facing a new challenge, one I never expected to encounter. It was a crisp autumn morning when I received a call from my doctor. The news hit me like a ton of bricks. I had been diagnosed with a rare form of cancer. The prognosis was uncertain, and the treatment would be aggressive. For a moment, I felt the world spin around me. I thought of all we had accomplished, of the dreams still unfulfilled. But then, I remembered the countless challenges we'd overcome at the Grandview. This was just another hurdle, albeit a personal one. I decided to approach this battle with the same determination and positivity that had guided me through the hotel's toughest times. However, I knew I couldn't do it alone. It was time to lean on the family I had built at the Grandview. Gathering my management team, I shared the news. The room fell silent, faces etched with concern and shock. But as I outlined my plan to fight this disease while keeping the hotel running smoothly, I saw something else emerge in their eyes: resolve. Brian was the first to speak up. "Walter," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "you've always been there for us. Now, it's our turn to be there for you. Whatever you need, we've got your back." The others nodded in agreement, and I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. This was the true measure of what we'd built at the Grandview. Not just a successful business, but a community that supported each other through thick and thin. Over the next few months, as I underwent treatment, I witnessed the strength of this community firsthand. The staff rallied around me, picking up extra shifts to cover when I needed rest, sending home-cooked meals, and even organizing a support group for employees affected by cancer. But what touched me most was how they kept the Grandview's spirit alive in my absence. They didn't just maintain our standards, they elevated them. Each team member seemed to take personal responsibility for preserving the legacy we'd built together. I remember one day coming in for a brief visit between treatments, overhearing Sarah at the front desk. A guest had mentioned it was their anniversary, and Sarah immediately sprang into action. By the time the couple returned from their day out, their room had been transformed into a romantic oasis, complete with rose petals, champagne, and a handwritten note congratulating them. It was moments like these that kept me going through the darkest days of my treatment. The Grandview wasn't just surviving without my constant presence, it was thriving. My team had truly internalized our philosophy of personalized, heartfelt hospitality. As my treatment progressed, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. From a poor kid in the South Side to the owner of a prestigious hotel, from an undercover boss to a mentor and leader. Each step had prepared me for this moment, teaching me the value of perseverance, compassion, and community. Months passed, and finally, after what felt like an eternity of treatments and tests, I received the news we'd all been hoping for. The cancer was in remission. The relief and joy I felt were indescribable, but they were magnified tenfold by the reaction of my Grandview family. The day I returned to work full-time, I was greeted by a lobby full of staff, guests, and even local community members. They erupted in applause as I walked through the doors, and I felt tears welling up in my eyes. This wasn't just a workplace. It was a home, filled with people who had become as dear to me as any blood relatives. As life slowly returned to normal, I found that my perspective had shifted. The brush with mortality had reinforced what truly mattered: the connections we make, the lives we touch, the legacy we leave behind. I was more determined than ever to ensure that the Grandview continued to be a force for good in the world. Inspired by my own experience, we launched a new initiative, the Grandview Cares program. We partnered with local hospitals to offer complimentary stays to cancer patients and their families who had traveled to Chicago for treatment. Our staff volunteered their time to make these guests feel especially welcome, offering everything from cozy blankets to home-cooked meals. The program was an immediate success, not just in terms of the lives it touched, but in how it energized our team. Everyone, from housekeeping to management, felt a renewed sense of purpose. We weren't just in the hospitality business anymore. We were in the business of healing, of providing comfort and hope to those who needed it most. As word of the Grandview Cares program spread, we began to receive inquiries from other hotels wanting to implement similar initiatives. I found myself being invited to speak at industry conferences, sharing our story, and encouraging others to find ways to give back to their communities. It was at one of these conferences that I had an encounter that would shape the next chapter of the Grandview's story. After my speech, a young woman approached me, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. She introduced herself as Amelia, a recent hospitality school graduate. "Mr. Thompson," she said, her voice filled with passion, "your story, the Grandview's philosophy, it's inspired me. I want to learn from you, to be part of something meaningful like this." As I talked with Amelia, I saw in her the same fire, the same dedication to genuine hospitality that had driven me all those years ago. And suddenly, I had an epiphany. It was time to start thinking about the Grandview's future, about ensuring that its spirit would live on long after I was gone. Over the next few months, I worked closely with Amelia, mentoring her in every aspect of the hotel's operations. She was a quick study, eager to learn and full of fresh ideas. But more importantly, she understood the heart of what made the Grandview special: the emphasis on personal connections, on treating every guest and employee with genuine care and respect. As Amelia grew into her role, I began to step back, allowing her to take on more responsibilities. It wasn't always easy. I had poured my heart and soul into this place for so long that letting go, even a little, was challenging. But seeing the Grandview through Amelia's eyes, watching her infuse it with new energy while staying true to its core values, filled me with a sense of pride and hope for the future. One evening, as Amelia and I were reviewing plans for an upcoming renovation, she asked me a question that caught me off guard. "Walter," she said, her voice thoughtful, "what do you want your legacy to be?" I paused, considering her words carefully. "You know, Amelia," I finally replied. "I used to think it was about building a successful business, about proving that a kid from the South Side could make it big. But now I realize it's about so much more than that." I gestured around us, at the bustling lobby, the smiling staff, the contented guests. "This," I said, "all of this, it's not just about providing a place to sleep or even creating memorable experiences. It's about building a community, about showing that in a world that can often feel cold and impersonal, there's still room for warmth, for genuine human connection." Amelia nodded, her eyes bright with understanding. "That's what drew me to the Grandview," she said. "It's not just a hotel, it's a beacon of hope, a reminder of what's possible when we lead with compassion and integrity." Her words struck a chord in me, crystallizing thoughts that had been forming in my mind for some time. I realized then that my job wasn't finished. Yes, I had built something special with the Grandview, but ensuring its legacy, passing on its values to the next generation, that was the true work of a lifetime. Over the next year, I worked closely with Amelia and the rest of our management team to codify the Grandview's philosophy. We created training programs that went beyond the usual hospitality standards, focusing on emotional intelligence, empathy, and the art of creating genuine connections. We also expanded our community outreach, partnering with local schools to offer internships and mentoring programs. I wanted to ensure that other kids from backgrounds like mine would have the opportunity to see hospitality as a viable and rewarding career path. As I watched Amelia and our other young leaders grow and flourish, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The Grandview had become more than I ever dreamed it could be. It wasn't just a successful business. It was a force for good in the world, a living embodiment of the values I held dear. Now, as I stand here today, looking out over the Chicago skyline from the Grandview's rooftop garden, I can't help but marvel at the journey that brought me here. From a doorman to an undercover boss, from a cancer survivor to a mentor, every step has been a lesson, every challenge an opportunity for growth. The Grandview stands tall and proud, a beacon of warmth and welcome in the heart of the city. But its true beauty isn't in its gleaming facade or luxurious amenities. It's in the stories that unfold within its walls every day. The lives touched, the connections made, the moments of joy and comfort shared. As I prepare to gradually step back from day-to-day operations, entrusting the Grandview's future to capable hands like Amelia's, I'm filled with a profound sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the opportunities I've had, for the people I've met along the way, for the chance to create something truly meaningful. The Grandview's story is far from over. In fact, I believe its best chapters are yet to be written. But whatever the future holds, I know that the spirit of genuine hospitality, of treating every person with dignity and respect, will continue to be at its heart. And really, isn't that the grandest legacy of all?